Ilmuwan politik Amerika dan pakar hubungan internasional John Mearsheimer mengecam militer Israel yang membantai rakyat Palestina dengan dalih Hamas. Hal itu ia tuangkan dalam bentuk artikel dengan judul Death and Destruction in Gaza di halaman Substack yang ia publikasi 12 Desember lalu.
I'm not criticizing the Israelis for responding to what Hamas did on October 7th. What I'm criticizing is how they responded. It made no sense militarily to launch a campaign where they're basically massacring huge numbers of Palestinians and starving Palestinians. There's no military utility to this. And from a moral point of view, I think there's no question that the Israelis, from their perspective, had to respond to what Hamas did on October 7th. But I don't think that they had to respond the way they have responded. And I think that their response could have been much more selective, and little emphasis should have been placed on punishing the civilian population. The emphasis should have been on going after Hamas, not going to great lengths to punish the Palestinian population in ways that we are watching now.
Pada sesi interview tersebut, John ditanya tentang two-state solution antara Israel dan Palestina, dan inilah jawaban beliau.
I don't believe a two-state solution is a realistic possibility. Certainly after what happened on October 7th and what has subsequently happened, there's not going to be a two-state solution. What the Israelis are determined to do is create a greater Israel, and they're unwilling, the Israeli government is unwilling to go to a two-state solution. There's a fundamental problem in how you think about this whole issue. And that is, you think that Hamas is a state and that Israel is a state. And this is a classic case of interstate politics where realism applies. But that's not what's going on here. This is a case where you have a greater Israel, and Hamas is a group that operates inside of greater Israel. And this is a resistance movement. That's what's going on here. This is not interstate relations. Realism doesn't have a lot to say about relations between Hamas and Israel. You could argue that creating a Palestinian state and thinking about relations between a Palestinian state and Israel would bring realpolitik onto the table, because then you'd have two states and you'd have interstate relations. But this is not a case of interstate relations. Hamas is not a state. You said before that, one could argue that Israel is facing an existential threat. This is not a serious argument. Do you really believe that Hamas is an existential threat to Israel? Israel is a remarkably powerful state. In my opinion, it is militarily the most powerful state in the region. It is the only state that has nuclear weapons. Hamas doesn't even have a state, right? It occupies Gaza, which is part of greater Israel. It's remarkably weak. This is the kind of threat inflation that you get in the West, in places like Britain where you operate, and places like the United States where I operate, that are all designed to justify what Israel is doing, right? If they're facing an existential threat, if this is the second coming of the Third Reich, if Hamas fighters are the new Nazis, then, you can make an argument that what you're doing here is you're killing large numbers of Palestinians to avoid another Holocaust. That's not what's going on here. Hamas is not the Third Reich. They're not an existential threat to Israel. What country is going to invade Israel and threaten its survival? There's no country. Jordan? I don't think so. Egypt? I don't think so. Syria? Iraq? I don't think so. Lebanon? No. Is there a problem with Hezbollah? No. Right? I mean, Hezbollah has lots of rockets and missiles, and it could do huge amounts of damage inside Israel if it launched those approximately 150,000 rockets and missiles. There's no question about that. But Hezbollah does not have the capability to invade Israel and conquer any territory and hold on to it. I mean, it's not a serious argument, nor does Hamas have that capability. To the extent that Israel might face an existential threat in the future. That would be true if Iran were to get nuclear weapons, right? Because Iran and Israel obviously have hostile relations, bitter relations, and one could tell a story about how a conflict between the two of them escalated to the nuclear level. Of course, again, this assumes that Iran has nuclear weapons, but Iran is not a military threat to invade Israel and conquer Israel. And again, you don't want to forget that Israel has nuclear weapons. They are the ultimate deterrent. I've yet to see a country that has nuclear weapons disappear from the face of the earth. And I don't think that Israel is going to be the first country that fills the bill on that score. It's just not going to happen. I have long been a proponent of a two-state solution, but I have long argued that it was no longer a viable alternative because I thought the Israelis were not interested after Camp David in 2000 in a two-state solution. But now, I think after what's happened, it's almost impossible to conceive of Israel creating a Palestinian state that is right next door to Israel.
Kemudian Profesor John ditanya, jika two-state solution bukan solusi, apa solusi untuk Israel dan Palestina?
I have no solution. I think what you're going to end up with is more of the same, which is a greater Israel that is an apartheid state.